Rise and shine. Pour yourself a cup of coffee and tune in to Good Morning Aurora. News, weather, and really cool interviews. Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m.
Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. The second largest city's first daily news podcast is live, and we have a lot of great stuff for you today in regards to information and another good interview. We have with us in the studio, we have Mr. David Weaver, better known as Radioman 911. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good
All
morning,
right,
Curtis.
Good to have you. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
We also want to say what's up to my co-host Christine.
Good morning.
JV and Hunter. And now we have a lot to tell you guys about before we get into the interview. So without further delay, let's get that news popping.
All right. Sugar Skull City again. It officially begins in 2 days. We've been talking about how adults can display their artwork in the downtown business windows. Well, kids are now doing it too. Shout out to our friend Simon Rodriguez and the City of Aurora Youth Services. They've partnered with Communities and Schools, Aurora Public Art, and Aurora Downtown to present an exciting art kit in celebration of Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. Come out today at 10 a.m. to pick up a free fall activity kit for youth 1st through 5th grade. Any student from any school in Aurora, private and homeschool included, can pick up a kit, and students from Aurora, any Aurora school are welcome. You don't need to attend the school that you're picking up the kits, and they're on a first-come, first-served basis. So today at 10 a.m., they'll be at Freeman Elementary, Greenman Elementary School, Hall Elementary School, Hill Elementary School, and then McCleary Elementary. So it's a really cool gift pack. It's got like little coloring pages and some markers. So that's pretty exciting. It's great that everyone's getting involved in that.
Nice.
Good morning, Aurora Sports. Tennessee Titans remain undefeated. Last night they beat the Buffalo Bills 42-16. In baseball, the Braves won 8-7 over the Dodgers in Game 2. They're leading that series 2-0 in the NLCS. And then finally, the Tampa Bay Rays beat the Houston Astros 5-2 in Game 3. The Rays have a 3-0 lead in the ALCS, and they're one win away from their second World Series.
Word up.
And that's what's happening in sports. What's going on with weather?
All right. So the current temperature is 46 degrees with a high of 75 today. That high should be reached at around 2:30 p.m. It appears it'll be cloudy all day, which is nice. If you're like me, we like the gloom. It's very calm, it's very soothing, and we hope that the weather turns even worse with perhaps thunderstorms, rain, cats and dogs, and all of that. It's very nice for the soul. Tomorrow will be partly cloudy with a high of 55 degrees, and Friday as well. So there's a couple of interesting blurbs to talk about. Number one, chief on the menu and the agenda is tomorrow is another round of the Change Initiative listening sessions taking place in Aurora. Now, we were present for the first round, which was at City Hall. These are at local area churches. Tomorrow will be at St. Therese Church, located at 271 North Farnsworth Avenue. The next session will be on October 22nd at Main Baptist Church, located at 814 East Galena Boulevard. Join Mayor Irvin and Aurora police officials as they listen to your thoughts on policing and progress in Aurora. All sessions start at 6 p.m. For more information, you can go to www.auroratacil.org/change. TAC is a Navy term for a dash, so it's Aurora-IL. To register, you have to register. Don't just show up thinking you're going to get in because it's a church, because they won't let you in. You have to register. Very important. These are every Thursday, and they're at 6 o'clock p.m. Friday at McCarty Mills, friends of ours, Strawberries Barbecue will be cooking out once again. On the menu will be pulled pork, wings, ribs, and rib tips. Sides will be mac and cheese and beans. Yummy. Now, on this day in history, a lot of great things happen. Spectacular things. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. won the Nobel Prize for Peace for Civil Rights and Social Justice work. Also on this day in history, in 1926, English humorist A.A. Milne published Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, I love Winnie the Pooh.
Hey, how about that? A children's book featuring the adventures of a honey-loving bear and his friends, including the famous Eeyore and Piglet. On this day in 1890, Dwight Eisenhower was born in Denison, Texas. D.W. would go on to become Supreme Allied Commander in World War II and the 34th President of the United States. And personally, he's my favorite president. On this day in the year 1066, at the Battle of Hastings, King Harold II of England was defeated by the invading army of William, Duke of Normandy, in the Norman conquest, establishing the Normans as the rulers of England. And lastly, in 1944, German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, ended his life by drinking poison, following the discovery of his connection to a conspiracy to assassinate the Fuhrer. Also, remember, digital applications for the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, are available. They're online, auroratechil.org/neighborhood redevelopment. They have to be submitted by 4 o'clock p.m. Monday, October 23rd. Very important. Please take part in that. Also want to give a thank you to our friends of Invest Aurora and the Aurora Regional Chamber of Commerce and the Aurora Regional Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. A super big mouthful.
It's a lot of words.
It's a lot of words. It really is. Also, big shouts out go to the American Legion at the moment, MVets Post 103, which is located at 1194 Jericho Road, the Aurora Food Pantry, next door to that, and our friends of Healing to Healthy, and recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and our friends at Mutual Ground in recognition of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And that's the news. And now we get into our discussion, our chop up, our radio traffic with Mr. Dave Weaver. How are you, sir?
Good morning.
Good morning to you, brother. Good morning to you. Good to have you on the show today.
It's great to be in the basement of the library. I was down here when I was a kid, and this was the children's books area.
Yes, yeah. And when you look around, it's a lot different. I mean, because you remember it full of books, like a lot of other people do as well. I remember the top, so the one right above us, in that section, everything. Spent a lot of time here. I'm not an Aurora native, but when I did move here to Aurora, this was still in use as the library. And then I remember when Santori came about to be used. So yeah, good memories here. Good memories. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time Xeroxing Cliff Notes so I could write book reports.
Oh yeah, old school.
Cliff Notes.
That's back when they had the pull out with the index cards, right? So
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Man. Then phones came and it's like I can just Google it. Like, all right.
Well, most people are familiar with you kind of through like your live streams that you do when there's an emergency. You're behind the scene reporting. But why don't you tell everybody who you are and where you're from?
I grew up out here in Aurora and went to work for a little TV station in Elgin back when I was 16. Well, actually, when I was 15, I got an internship there.
Okay.
And when I turned 16 and got my driver's license, they started trusting me with a camera. And I would go out and shoot the stories that they would give me the assignments for. And oftentimes it would be Aurora events like Arms Across Aurora, things that had Fred Rogers involved at the time was always fun to be around. And when I wasn't doing those pre-set assignments, I would be listening to the radio so that I could try to find out where the action was going on. My dad was an Aurora police officer and had a scanner in the house. And so I asked him if I could put it in my bedroom, and I was only, I think, in first grade. And so my version of a radio program was listening to the scanner and listening to the police and the fire department being dispatched to things that if they were close to my far west side house, I would run to the end of the block and try to catch a glimpse of the fire engine going by or, listen for sirens. And I always had this longing to be on the street. I asked my dad if I could become a cop. He said no. He doesn't remember telling me that, but I didn't question why. He thinks maybe it was because he didn't think that my nature would be suited to a regiment lifestyle. And maybe that's the case. And I'm glad that he did say that because it made me think, what can I do to be out there on the street? And news photographer was what I set my sights on. Got this break to intern at this TV station, got the job part-time when I turned 16, and then when I was 18, I bought my own equipment and started to sell footage to the Chicago TV stations, and that's called stringing. And that allowed me to supplement my income from the TV station income and put myself through Columbia College. I lived in Chicago for 26 years. and then decided in 2014 to escape back out here to my homeland and continued to cover news stories, but instead of being in the city all the time, I'm out here.
More local.
Mhm.
Right. So you always knew that you wanted to do this. That's amazing with that. Growing up, what impact did your mom have on your life?
She allowed me independence, which was huge. And I don't know how many parents these days would do what my mom did. You know, she let me explore the neighborhood. She let me go on my big wheel and stay on the block. And when the streetlights came on, it was time to be home. And in between there was long windows where I was probably nowhere to be seen. I even remember as a little kid having another kid from the neighborhood, a little older than me, convinced me to go underneath somebody's porch. And when he pulled out some matches, and I ran out of there because I knew that was bad news. And then I got home, I was taking a bath, and I heard some commotion next door. I looked out, and there was a police car in the driveway. And I knew right away what it was for. And my mom, I ran out of the house, and my mom was yelling at me, "Get back!" And I knew that the cops were there to find this kid. And I was there when they got him, and he started crying, and his dad showed up, and a neighbor took a picture of me standing there
Oh my goodness.
observing.
Just watching it all go down.
Yeah, so my mom was definitely instrumental, because if she had been a helicopter mom, I wouldn't have had my feet out there in the neighborhood talking to people. And that's what I enjoyed doing, is finding the stories out there, becoming friends with people that in the morning I didn't know existed.
Yeah, I remember those days of the street lights, and you could go and you just left early in the morning, and then later on you'd come back. And again, that was kind of like I think my mom always wanted us out of the house. I'm the youngest of 6.
Uh-huh.
So do you have any siblings?
I was the
you
oldest.
You guys come back later.
I was the oldest, so and at the time, I think I had to get all of the. My mom and dad had to like raise me, and then they kind of gave up on the younger ones. They had it easy, you know.
Yeah.
They could have the run of the mill and not have to worry. I set the tone.
They were the hardest or the strictest with you as
Right,
far
right.
as those guidelines.
Good morning, Tracy Duran. What was the station that with the first station, Elgin?
It was Centel Cable. Centel Cable became Jones Intercable, and then Jones Intercable became, I think, Time Warner, or I don't know.
Okay.
Because by then I was gone from Aurora. But
You were in Chicago by that time.
mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I started working. WGN hired me when I was 19 as a per diem, which is a freelancer. But and I was going to Columbia College at the time. It was the summer after my sophomore year at Columbia. They went from a half hour to an hour long 9 o'clock news, and they needed more photographers. They already knew my work because I had been selling them footage, and they asked me if I wanted to join them, and I thought, yeah, absolutely. So I had a great time for 8 years running around Chicago in a WGN car, covering news with their reporters, and then that's when I thought, well, I want to do more stories, more in-depth news magazine type stories, and started working for Inside Edition, started working for the networks, and so I moved from local to national stories at that point. But I've always maintained that local desire.
Local
Sure.
feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the scoop.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's happening. Yeah. What's the difference between news in a town like Elgin and news in a place like Chicago?
Well, the TV station was based in Elgin, but then after we were done shooting, I would come back to Aurora. So my assignments would be anywhere from Elgin to Yorkville to western DuPage County. And out here covering those stories, at the time, it was nice because when I would go to something, I would be the only one there. And then when I went to Chicago, now you're part of the whole pack that's going to be there.
Right.
And so coming back out here, I'm back into that situation where, like yesterday, I went to a crash in DeKalb County, and it was just me and another photographer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different challenges now than there were back then, because back then, if you showed up with a camera, you were the news. And now everybody's got cameras.
Right.
And so police departments have kind of... I have to be diplomatic when I talk about police departments, because I have good relationships with departments,
Certainly.
but it's always a fight to get information because social media has made people so scared to say something wrong because the comment sections are going to roast you if you say something wrong.
Full of all kinds of stuff.
So that has a chilling effect on the way that news gets disseminated. And then with a town like Aurora where there is no access to the routine patrol radio communications, the Facebook crowd can set the news by putting a picture out. And now those comments may have good information in them, or they may have some rumor, they may have some embellishment, some just plain old wrong information. And so I've seen it change over the years from being anybody with a camera is legit to
Right.
A different story nowadays.
Yeah, I think about, you mentioned Aurora. I think about specifically the issue. There was an incident in Aurora, Colorado, which was bad. People here in Aurora were taking that and putting it out there. Oh, look at APD, and not taking the time to distinguish between Aurora, Colorado, and Aurora, Illinois.
They get confused.
So I get, and you. So I understand what you mean. Police departments are reluctant to talk to anybody because who knows if they give the information where that's going to go, how it's going to be construed, and all that kind of stuff.
On that Aurora, Colorado story, that was partially the fault of WMAQ TV on their website had put out something attributing Aurora Police Chief Kristen Zeman as being the chief, and it was not in relation to the story from Aurora, Illinois,
Right.
and so there was a little ball dropped
I think they
on
issued a
there.
retraction.
In Aurora, police issued a little bit harsher statement than they really needed
I saw
to.
it.
Yeah, they don't need to school any. Every station's doing their best, and by and large, one of the things that I've noticed, especially with this president demonizing the news media, is that there are people out there who are anti-media that maybe wouldn't have been, or there is definitely not the love for the news that there used to be.
There's
Some of
not.
it's warranted, but by and large, stations are made up of good people that are just trying to do their job and get the news out to the people. And I'm trying to make images that will allow the viewer to see what's happening in a digested form. Reporters are trying to convey that story in a minute and 20 seconds or 2 minutes long, and people try their best to get the news out, and then so often there's so much hate out there in the comments for the news. I go, it's not that bad. It's really not. I've been seeing it firsthand for 34 years now. It's not that. There's no conspiracy. Nobody gets together in the morning and says, "Oh, we're not going to cover this story," or with big networks being owned by corporations, that's probably going to have an impact on certain stories. But with all the different networks, all competing for trying to find the news of the day, things really aren't getting brushed under the rug. Stories are stories, and they're going to get covered. And the quicker that a story can be discovered, the better it is for the public.
How do you determine which stories you're going to go out and cover? Because I know there were a couple of the riots out here. I remember following you and listening to this, play-by-play pretty much of what you were capturing out there.
If I try to listen for stories that are that man bites dog type of a thing, where there is something to it. Sometimes you don't really know until you go that whether or not there's going to be something there. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times I'll go to things, most of the time I'll go to things, and I won't make any money if it's, on my freelance side. Mm-hmm. I won't know until I get there whether there's, like yesterday, there was a DUI involved in this head-on crash. And even a rural country crash is not going to make it on the Chicago news stations by itself. Right. So if you add a DUI element, where maybe somebody was intoxicated and could have prevented the crash by not being so. Now you've got more of a story than just someone being killed.
Right.
And so those are stories that, but then there's other stories that I know right away are going to be a story. I was monitoring Aurora, didn't know whether there'd be any problems. So when there became problems, that's when I know, okay, time to go to work.
Yeah, yeah. I remember listening to that and just being like, when you were telling people where they were going or they were coming down Indian Trail, I said, they're going downtown.
Yeah.
Where did you live when you lived in Chicago?
I lived first downtown in the Printers Row area, and then I lived up next to WGN because I hate commuting, which is the reason why I stayed in Chicago. So instead of even WGN was the only TV station that wasn't downtown, so I moved into a apartment where I could look out and see the station.
I would think there's a lot of news on the L and the red line and the blue line. There's news on that. Boy. There's some characters on there.
Oh, definitely. Well, for years I shot for the city of Chicago as their main freelance cameraman, and the CTA's TV show was one of my shows that I shot for. And to be honest, even though I shot for the housing authority, I was more nervous down in the tubes than I was working Cabrini Green.
Right. Yeah.
Because down in the subway, you don't know what's going on, and somebody come up to you and get you before you have a chance to react. So
tying your shoelaces, and the next thing you know, whatever.
Right.
When you were young, who were the news guys that you were watching? Who was the guy that the folks were getting around? And
I think Joel Daly was a biggie because he was Aurora tie. Or John Drury. Well, John Drury had the Aurora tie. Joel Daly and John Drury, Fahey Flynn, and a lot of Channel 7 folks.
Throwbacks. All right.
Rod Majors,
this is a great episode.
Carol Marine.
Half the people out there going, who?
Right, yeah.
Bill Curtis.
Curtis,
And then he started his own production company that had a lot of programming on the A&E network, and I was lucky enough to do some of those programs as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Growing up, I've been watching the news ever since I was a kid. Woke up, fourth grade, woke up, news, get it, and then go to school. And it still continues to this day. I wake up and turn the news on immediately. To your point about stories and if it'll make it and if it won't, I was interviewed one time by ABC 7 when I worked downtown Chicago. The lady talked to me for about a good 2 minutes. When I got home and saw the interview on the 6 o'clock news or whatever it was, my little speaking part was reduced to 15 seconds, if that. I mean, it was just a blur. We're talking about the new liquor license law in Chicago, and they had me like, oh, I think it's blah, blah. And, at first I'm like, well, what the hell? I talked to that lady for a good long time. She gave me her card. We're high-fiving and coking and joking. But that's how it is. I mean, there's so much news to be covered in a time. They're not, they're not telling the story. They have to do what they got to do to get as much as possible, as much information as possible. Now, you don't have that restraint, do you? Not anymore. When you freelance, you can take as much time as you want with a story. Is that accurate?
Well, when I work for ABC News, going out and shooting for them, we can spend hours and hours with somebody, and then it gets whittled down.
Right.
But I shoot. I always, when I shoot, I know what I need to get in order to get the editor what they need to do the job. So I shoot with the editing in mind, and I try not to overshoot, and I don't undershoot. I just try doing it so long, I just kind of know when I got enough. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the producer will say, "Oh, we need this," but most of the time I try to make it so they don't even have to give me any direction. I just get the job done. When I work for myself, doing the Radioman 911 coverage, I don't have any restraint on how much time it's going to be. I'll throw it on the live shot and let it kind of grow an audience and hope that maybe somebody will come on the comments that has some information that will be helpful to me, some insight into what's going on. Somebody might have some tips and clues about what they've heard. And, there's there's a level of trying to figure out whether or not it's accurate or not. But when you have a city where you don't have access to their radio system, you need all that help that you can get. Aurora Fire Department is also encrypted. So where most cities have radio fire departments that you can monitor, and at least if you can't hear their police, you at least can hear their fire department going to stuff. Aurora, you get nothing. So we really rely for news people on Facebook and the peanut gallery to find out
I know what you mean.
what's
by that.
happening.
Yeah. That's not a site, people. You can't. That's not. There's no .com for that. Yeah, you got to know what the peanut gallery is.
But I've heard you check, because here I'm going on our Facebook, checking out the comments and live and interacting with people too, and that's exactly what you're doing out there, is kind of getting the information, going to maybe another route or another place. This road's closed. We're going to go over here and get that. So
I got a comment for you. Wow, what a guest. Friend of the show, Salvatore, Big Sal, just had a baby. Congratulations over there, Big Sal. And then also, I want to read something to you from our good friend Tracy Duran. His footage of the rioting in downtown Aurora was so haunting to see. It was crazy to see it live on his Facebook Live, and then walking out of my place and seeing the smoke from a distance was so scary. How'd you feel that night when you're down there?
I felt that it could have been worse. I was glad that it was, at least contained to what it was. 'Cause I was in Ferguson. I saw the beginnings of that, and I was there for 5 different trips. I saw the difference between protests and criminal activity, and I understand where when no one's being heard that there's this rage that has to get out sometimes, and so it did make me. It made me feel that Aurora did a good job of letting things transpire and kind of stepping in when they needed to. They weren't overly aggressive with that crowd. Right. I mean, I think some of it, with windows and spray painting and burning police cars was kind of going to be par for the course. Right. And by and large, Aurora, I think, did all right. There was a woman that sent me a message on Facebook saying how she thanked me because she had a son who was very scared after the rioting. And she showed him my live shot the following night, and he recognized things in my video that he knew, and it made him feel good. And she just wanted me to know that she appreciated that, and that's the kind of thing that I really I do it for.
Yeah. The uncertainty is scary, because I was out there that night and watched it all happen. We were standing guard by one of my friend's restaurants, and everything was pretty calm. But again, to the outsider, it looked terrible. A lot worse than it really was, and it was pretty bad later as it went on with that. What was the most memorable, other than, you said you were at Ferguson, Aurora, what kind of sticks out in your mind, stories that you've covered?
The Plainfield tornado was a big one, mm-hmm. because I was out that day down southwest of Aurora with that nice hot day it was, and then came downtown Aurora and the sky turned green and hail started, so I shot some footage of that, thinking, well, a little weather here, this is interesting.
1990?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I heard a roof blown off of a house in Oswego. I thought, oh, this is a big story, and went down there. And then after that, I heard about Plainfield. Mm-hmm. And riding into Plainfield as a 19-year-old, I realized that we're not the ones in charge. And it was the first major event that I had ever laid eyes on.
Yeah, because that one was one where the sirens never went off, correct?
Right. It was a huge, what they call micro burst that was like a hand just pushed over the city of Plainfield and Crest Hill and killed 17 mm-hmm. people. And I was out talking to a guy next to an overturned Volkswagen bus, and I said, "Oh wow, you're lucky, you survived." He says, "Yeah, my wife was killed," and it was just me and him and this whole town of destruction. And I thought, in any other situation, this guy would have counseling, he would have somebody, but he's got nobody to talk to, but just some camera guy that walked up to him. Meanwhile, everybody else is in peril.
All
And
the chaos, the shock, just the emotions going on there.
yeah, it was 1990.
Wow.
I was a freshman in college.
1990.
Standing in front of a glass plate window, looking. Why is it so dark out there?
I was 8 years old. Holy cow. So here's a question I got for you. Well, first of all, do you know Chuck Gowdy?
Yes.
Tell him I love Chuck Gowdy and the I-Team. Since I was a small boy, tuning in like clockwork. Okay, so it's my little fanism right there. Chuck Gowdy, shout out, man. Growing up the son of a police officer, when you are out there and you've been on the scene and things, do you carry either the mentality of or the thought process of the analytic skills of your dad or any law enforcement, residue, for lack of a better term, at the moment when you're out at these places?
I think so. I think I've got a level of street smarts just by working so many years as a cameraman. You need to win people over. You need to get their respect. You need to earn their trust if you want to get your story. And so that taught me how to talk to people. And then there's also the self-preservation factor where I've got all this equipment with me, and I'm slower if I want to keep it with me.
Right.
And I want it, so I don't want to, so I'm always looking around and seeing who's coming. I try to keep my guard up.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, I think so. I think I would have been a good cop.
Yeah.
But maybe my dad was right. I would have not liked the regimented lifestyle of going to work every day. As a freelancer, I don't have a job every day of the week. I'll have stretches where I may go 2 weeks in a row without a day off, but then I may have a week off. And so it's all depends on what news is going on, as whether or not I'm working.
Yeah. You were one of the toughest guests to try and book.
Well,
True story.
Well, you know Chuck Gowdy.
Appreciate
You
that.
can't just. Thanks, Dave, for sharing your skills / life with us. Thank you for Good Morning Aurora too, Yahoo. Susan May Romano, thank you very much. Our friends with Healing to Healthy. So thanks for everything you do, Dave.
Very nice.
Go ahead with your question.
How did you come up with the name Radioman 911, other than the obvious? But
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard of an event out in Nevada called Burning Man.
okay.
I got a friend that asked me to set up an emergency broadcast system at Burning Man. And I looked at and I said, well, there's no cell service out there. I don't want to go out in the middle of the desert. And then I saw that they had this elaborate 911 system. Well, there's no telephone, so it's actually a radio 911 system, and that they dispatch fire and ambulances and mental health providers and liaison with the Bureau of Land Management and the county sheriff in order to help get criminals apprehended out there, and that all this goes on a temporary basis in a temporary city in the middle of nowhere. And I thought, wow, this would be an opportunity to be a dispatcher, because I've always loved good communications. This would be my opportunity to do it. And so I joined, and for 8 years, I went from a dispatcher to dispatch supervisor for the event, and somebody nicknamed me Radioman out there. And so when I had to so that was my inspiration to take an event like Burning Man that is all based on not being a spectator but a participant, and taking the radios that I had in my house, putting them online, and then trying to find a community of people that were like me, that wanted to know what was happening, to then participate in the information process by listening to my radios that I'm giving them over the internet, but then providing a word giving of, oh, I just heard this. And then that would allow other people to start listening and to try to hear what's happening in real time.
Interesting.
The time is now 9:05 a.m. You're listening to Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. And we're sitting down with Mr. Dave Weaver, Radioman 911. Sounds like a cool buddy cop show, right? When we talk about journalism, what is the impact of how has journalism changed from your day to now? We talked about the technical aspect of it and all that kind of stuff, but what are the key, what kind of non-technical or soft skills, if you will, have changed from then till now?
I think that as far as public safety goes, covering regular stories pretty much is the same. I mean, there's technology-wise that has allowed us to get away from satellite trucks and using basically cigar box size bonded cellular boxes in order to get our HD signal in, where we used to have a big satellite truck and bounce things.
I remember those days.
You know, now I got a little Pelican case that allows me to go live from anywhere I can get cellular service.
Right.
So, but the nuts and bolts of covering regular stories is pretty much the same with, but then with public safety, one thing I've noticed is that departments have decided to rely more on public information officers, and have kind of pulled back from giving information out on the street the way they used to. If I waited long enough at most stories when I was younger, I could get some street sergeant to at least give me the nuts and bolts of what was happening.
Yeah.
And now they go, oh, you got to talk to the public information officer, which is basically a code for me that good luck.
Get out of here. Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Right. And so as much as people, as much as maybe some police officers might say, oh, the news doesn't get it right, news can't get it right if it doesn't get it. And there's been information that's come out of Aurora that has been inaccurate.
Right.
And so it's like, I don't really want to rely on Aurora police to give me the news. I want to hear about it, go there, find it out, and report on it myself without any interference or watering down of what the story might be.
Right.
Yeah, you mentioned the encryption as well, as far as that. I mean, what are some of the challenges or your thoughts on that?
Encryption is a tough thing for people that want to know what's happening out there. It started off, the excuse originally was that the scanner apps on people's phones allow them to easily hear what's happening. And police departments will tell you, oh, well, we don't want sensitive information going out to the general public. But I have always felt like that's kind of letting the criminals win, kind of a thing, or letting the terrorists win, like letting the criminals dictate. Because I think the greater good comes from information. Transparency is a big deal. Not when it comes to radio systems. Right now, the King County Sheriff's Department is apparently looking to use COVID as an excuse to encrypt, trying to say that there's that now that the county sheriff has to deal with figuring out who might be exposure risks, that's somehow going to be a HIPAA violation. But they're not the ones running around in the ambulances. And they're already got it.
Yeah,
I know BS.
Yeah. You can tell when they're trying to throw you off,
They're giving a 46-year-old male, not like, a name or anything like that on it.
Right, yeah. Departments have been putting out, information about who's got a broken leg over here or who, but they're not putting names over the radio. And so there is no HIPAA violation there. And I think that, so you got the scanner apps, and now you've also got, there are some Facebook pages out there, groups, that put out too much information. They don't self-police protecting open airwaves because they want to put out things like domestic disturbances and things that that really are just not for a public audience.
Amen to that. Right.
I mean, yeah, somebody's possibly in bad shape in a domestic disturbance, but that's for the police to figure out and for them to provide counseling or whatever it is, it's not for the public to know. Um, I think that, Kendall County at some point is going to have to decide whether or not they're going to encrypt. And so as long as there's never been, in all the years that I've been watching news stories, there has never been police departments being ambushed by people who are using scanners. I think the greater good allows the citizens to hear what's happening in their community and maybe feel good that nothing's going on. Maybe get that, to me, I only want to live in a city where I can hear what's happening. So I want to know that whether there's a story or whether it's quiet out there. I get just as much enjoyment listening when things are all quiet than I do going to work. So
Yeah, especially in today's climate where everything seems to be kind of covered up, or maybe they're not telling everything. It's good to know what's actually happening.
And the longer it takes to find out about a story, the harder it is to get into the scene. Now the roadblock's farther away. Now the witnesses have left. Now it's just, it's the more time on a story, the more difficult it is to get the story.
Like a telephone game, right?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Once it's Susie hit Jackie. By the time you get it, what happened was, see, Jackie's husband, right? All that's fluff now in between. Okay.
No, sorry. I'm pretty sure I made a comment on one of your feeds or whatever, like, you need a press pass. We need to get you closer to find out what's going on.
I've had press passes since I was a sprout. Press passes are good in order to get a courtesy, like if there is a roadblock. That's where a press pass is needed, or if you do ask somebody for a comment to show that that you're credentialed. But really, everybody is the press. There is no, just because I have a press pass shouldn't give me any more access than anybody. We are the free press.
I totally agree with that statement. When I hear people say, silly things like the media is the enemy of the people or whatnot, I've always kind of retorted that, we are the media. The media is just people. It's just individuals. Sure, there may be a slight bent of whatever they're trying to accomplish in their, in their station or whatnot, but we are the media. The media is just made up of people and stories and things like that. So, no, I agree with that statement. That's very true. Go ahead.
On the flip side, what would you say to people in law enforcement that would say, we really don't, for crowd control, we really don't want everybody out there?
Well, I've never seen a massive amount of people hanging around anything that I've been at where I've considered it a problem. Mm-hmm. And if you look at pictures from old newspapers and look at fire scenes, everybody showed up at a fire. Because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah, the whole block. Yeah. Hair rollers, robes.
People have always been fascinated by what's happening in their community, and just because, somebody you could say is going to get in their car and drive there and then become a hazard to law enforcement, but I think by and large that's not really an issue.
That's what the roadblocks are for.
Yeah.
All right. I got 2 questions for you. Thought long and hard about these questions. Now, the very first one is, now you mentioned what your editor is looking for. So when you go out to shoot, you don't have to be told what he's going to want. You go in, you get the job done. Put some flesh on that for us. What is it that he wants?
From a fundamentals standpoint, they want a series of wide shots, medium shots, and close-ups that can be put together that give that viewer that feeling that they're there and are up close and personal. I kind of know that, like, for a 1.5-minute news story, that it's going to require a certain amount of footage from me in order to give them enough material to cut all of the different scenarios of setup shots. You'll have people looking introspectively out towards the Fox River that you're going to say, "Oh, Curtis once thought about," and so you know that you need to get certain elements. If they are a person who does a certain job, you need to get a certain amount of shots with them in their tractor and the gauges and that's what knowing what is needed to be shot comes from.
Okay. Now, the other part to that is that, I told you about, I'm talking to the lady about liquor licenses being extended. Talked to her for about 2 minutes. Then when it hit the news, I was on there for about 14 seconds. However, you do see news stories where you got the one lady that went viral.
Ain't got time.
Yeah.
Ain't got time
I
for
got
this.
bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that.
It's funny. I knew what you were going to say.
That,
I was hoping you did.
I mean, she had wide berth on the air. Is it purely for the hokey value that's not clipped and gets out there? What's the
Well,
how does what's the
we call those man on the street interviews. Well, actually, in her case, she was being interviewed about a particular incident.
it was a fire.
Right.
Yes.
So so you never know what you're going to get in a man on the street interview, and that was something where somebody took it on and made it into basically a meme. Just like the hide your kids, hide your wife.
Yes.
I mean, there's some great stuff out there. I've never had anything quite that exciting or quite that funny, but I've had some close.
What's the most
geez.
memorable one? What's the first? What are you thinking about right now? What's the one?
I had a kid once telling me how he didn't think that there should be a space shuttle, and he had this thing about the news that me and my buddy used to joke. How about the camera guy shows up and films it all up, and so it's just an inside joke between me and my friend, always saying cameraman film it all up. So it was just that was our own version of it. It never became viral because there was no internet at the time.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I can't think of anything. I mean, I've shot comedians, and that's where the funny stuff comes from.
I bet.
Jeff Garland, when he was just a little Second City ETC stage star, asked me to shoot his routine, and then he went on to become the actor comedian that he is, and that was interesting to see him
Very cool.
grow out.
Interesting history.
So you said you came back to Aurora. What do you feel are Aurora's strengths?
Well, for me, it was wanting to get back to where my family is at, but also just wanting to get away from the expense of Chicago for the minimum payoff as far as property value. I was paying $16,000 in taxes for a 25 by 125 lot that I had to always be on the defenses of burglars and gangbangers and every arsonist. I had all sorts of issues in the 13 years that I lived in the last place that I lived in the city. And so I was just done. I really wanted to get away. I didn't have to be in the city every day, so I thought I'll go out here where the cornfields begin. And I was so happy that I made that switch.
Yeah, come back
I don't mind the occasional traffic jam on the way into the city. A lot of times when I do Good Morning America shoots, I got to leave the house at 3:30 in the morning. So I don't have much traffic to deal with.
Right.
The best time to leave.
Right.
Early in the morning.
Now, we talked about the news being withheld. We talked about how police departments are. We talked about the challenges of dealing with encryption and things like that. But as a person who's been doing what you do for so long, when the public sees things like, we'll take the Laquan McDonald case, hiding tapes. We got a tape. Well, there is no tape. What are you talking about, a tape? Then we got a tape. we're reviewing the tape. The AG said there is going to be no tape. Then the tape comes out. You know, the 3-card Monty of the whole tape thing. Do you see how that frustrates the average citizen who would like to have the faith, but has that shaken by tapes being withheld and kind of things like that? You know, what's your opinion?
Well, in that case, to me it looked like Rahm Emanuel's office was the one that was involved with squashing that tape
Sure.
being released until so to try to help his reelection
Right.
efforts.
Yeah, not to put it on police departments, but just the tape hiding thing.
You know, I would love to see nothing but transparency.
Right.
All these body cameras and in-car cameras. When something goes down, I'd like to see that stuff get out there. I think Ferguson could have been prevented had that police chief gotten out in front of that story. You know, you sit on something and you let the mines
Yes.
start, and even if that was a justified shooting, enough people start believing that it's not, and now you're playing catch up. And if you don't get in front of that story, your whole city could burn down.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
You were
Very
out there
true.
for the George Floyd riots out there.
I went up after the initial riots. I'd actually gone up to do a story on how the Mall of America was going to reopen and how their COVID procedures, and they said, "Hey, why don't you just stay there a little bit?" And
See what's going on.
so
Some shopping.
I ended up covering some of the after effects. I wasn't there for the night when the CNN crew, that morning the CNN crew got arrested. I did see disinformation coming out from the Minnesota Highway Patrol saying, "Oh, we needed to arrest them so until we could determine that they were from the media." Oh yeah, okay, they were live on national TV, and you needed to figure out whether they were really the media or not. Come on.
It's big
Right.
CNN logo on the
Mhm.
camera.
But I've seen a lot of great examples of police work, and I just want to provide the public with a good understanding of what's happening, and not have any smoke screens to have to go through in order to get it. And so the more information, the more transparency, the better, in my opinion. Sometimes there's facts that need to be held back so that they can investigate a crime better, like only the killer knows something. I get that.
Right.
And so, you know, there's a balance between what the police need to hold back and what the public needs to find out about.
Is that a Crown Vic or a Grand Marquis you're rolling in?
I have a Suburban.
Oh, okay.
I used to have a Caprice. I actually had a Crown Vic. I had a Caprice. I had a Diplomat.
Okay.
As a little kid, because I was a little kid, I did start buying old police cars because I wanted to get a little bit more respect when I showed up.
Street cred.
I didn't have the years on my my body clock, but I at least had a car that made it look like I at least maybe belonged there.
Right.
That's great.
I look at old news from a lot of it from Chicago, good news from New York. I'm talking old school stuff, late, mid '60s, late '60s kind of thing. And you were right. Sarge is out there talking to the news guys. Sarge, what can you tell us? Well, right now we don't know. We got 2 dead bodies. Gunshot wound to the head and everything. That's all, guys. That's all. That kind of thing. I never did that or lived that life, but I kind of miss it. Do you miss that era of the talking if it was done right and correctly?
I do, and Chicago still does a great job with news media. They don't have a choice because they got all those TV stations in town. They can't hide.
Right.
Aurora, there's nobody out here.
Right.
So they don't have anybody putting pressure on them to make a statement, to do anything. Obviously you got your Henry Pratts, and you have other higher like your Timothy Pitson stories where there are going to be a bunch of cameras in town. But for the most part, Aurora gets to kind of be under the radar and run their own their own thing out here. You know, we're far enough away from Chicago that they're not going to send a crew here unless they really know it's a story. So my role as an independent journalist is to be out here already trying to mine those stories and giving the Chicago stations that information. And in radioman911.com, the website that I run, has what looks like a CAD dispatch, computer-aided dispatch screen of calls for all the counties that we monitor. And the Chicago TV stations look at that, and they look at that for possible stories. So I am trying to get stuff on there, and then also trying to get to the scene oftentimes. And after I get there, if I can get somebody to talk, great, but it doesn't happen anymore.
What counties are you monitoring?
Well, I set it up so that it was kind of the limits of our antennas. We've got radios in cities all over Chicagoland. And so we go northwest Indiana, we cover 4 counties. We cover the bottom of southeast Wisconsin, and then everything out basically almost to the Mississippi River up here.
Okay.
And one of the receivers we have is out in DeKalb County, and that's up real high. So I don't really care all that much about what's going on in Stevenson County or Whiteside County, but we're able to listen to it, so we include it into what we will provide. And once in a while, there'll be something big that'll happen out in the sticks. But
2
pretty
cows started fighting in the
right.
barnyard today.
Yeah.
Radio Man coming to your live.
Pretty much DeKalb is where the most people's news interests are gonna stop to the west, and
College activity is about it.
yeah, and they've had their share of action out there.
Facebook's building a whatchamacallit out there. They're building a headquarters.
Oh, I did
out
not know
there,
that.
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I saw that back in I think March or something like that. But yeah, they're investing. Got a lot of land out there. They're gonna build a site out there. Yeah, pretty interesting stuff from DeKalb. In all of your years of doing this, what is the one story you'll never forget?
Oh boy. Well, boy, I mean, I have to say covering Michael Jordan underneath the basket was pretty darn good, because that was some greatness there that was never going to be repeated, and kind of wrecked my whole people ask me if I want to go to a Bulls game, and I go, but as far as the biggest story, I've got ones that are favorite to me.
Impact on you.
Impact or for fun.
Both.
I was on a Coast Guard icebreaker up in the Straits of Mackinac when we had our polar vortex, like number 2, I think it was.
Yeah.
I love boats, and so I thought that was pretty darn cool, being in an icebreaker. But as far as impact on me, oh boy, I've had a couple stories where I can't really figure out what they are, but I've had a couple of times when, just covering recently with the riots, after Naperville went down, there was a woman who was in so much pain, and just talking to her made me realize that that's where it's all coming from. And things like that will have an impact on me. But, there's been stories that involve like whole families being killed and whatnot. But when you see people's pain, it is sometimes overwhelming. But, we do our job. We power through and try to be honest to what they're saying and digest it and put it out there for the public to be motivated by.
Yeah, I've on this show, we appreciate members of law enforcement. We give a damn what they go through. and we like hearing from him. One of the best guests that we've had was Sheriff Ron Hain. Really good guy, covering all the stuff that I was aware of all the good stuff the Kane County Sheriff's Office does. And yeah, the information and stories that people have inside of them, a lot of them, most of them will probably never make the news, but they are impactful and newsworthy to them. That's their own. Everybody has a story within them. And that's what we try to capture on this show, man. Like, that's, you know, so that's why I was asking you about, like, it didn't have to be the one that made the biggest headline. It's, you know, it's about what's impactful to you, because there's a lot of people going through things, and, you know, I really like to be the outlet for people to, express and stuff like that. I've liked watching the things that you do, because you carry a professionalism about it. And when you spoke about the peanut gallery and the knucklehead sites that just don't police, I think that was the term you used, they don't police themselves. I think they do a disservice to the people that they're talking about, and they make the brand, they make the professionalism, they make the profession unprofessional. You know, does that make sense to you? I don't like to see that kind of stuff. I think that you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are, man. You're doing a real good job.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Oh, and one other thing I wanted to touch on is that you also organized, or used to organize, an emergency vehicle parade,
for 21 years, we did an event called the Chicagoland Emergency Vehicle Show. It started in Chicago. It started in Harwood Heights, actually, as just a small gathering of antique police car owners. And that's always been a hobby of mine ever since, you know, I was a kid. I've always liked the lights and sirens, and you know, big fire engines driving down the street, and cool old cop cars. So in the 5th year of the event, it lost its home, and I helped the original show creator move it to out here to North Aurora, where it was at Oberweis Dairy and Aurora Pump Company, which is now called Pentair Water. We had it there for 14 years, and then moved to Aurora for a year, and then to Oswego for a few years. And because of a chain of events, now COVID, that show isn't going on, but it was fun to do, and it gave people an exposure to public safety in a family-friendly environment, allowed them to see things burning and see police responding in situations that didn't involve somebody's actual house burning down, or, you know. And then we celebrated the vehicles and had a parade, and the parade will still go on. North Aurora wants to continue doing the parade. So next year, you should see the emergency vehicle parade back, which kicks off North Aurora Days.
North Aurora Days, it kicks off. Okay.
Right.
All right. Share the scoop with us, and we'd like to get that out there and promote it. Message from our friend Tracy Duran. Dave does a great job getting the information out there.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yep.
I recognize her name from commenting on the site. So
yeah,
Yes.
she's a real big friend of ours.
Good.
Big friend of ours, and a great Aurora author and historian too. So the time is now. See, this is the right. I want to keep
We
going.
can keep going on. We can keep going on.
The time is now 9:33 a.m. You've been listening to and watching Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. We're glad to be speaking with Mr. Dave Weaver, Radioman 911. Dave, the show ends on a positive note. Oh,
One, real quick.
Yeah.
How can people find you? Facebook, website?
Yes.
Facebook, radioman911.com is actually our Facebook name. We actually have a website, radioman911.com, that allows you to create a free account and get access to our information that we post on there. And we also, there's a Twitter, but that's just a regurgitation of Facebook. Okay. So really just Facebook and the site
Best
itself.
ones to go to. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. The show ends on a positive note. What's your message for the people out there of Aurora today?
Oh boy, try to find those stories and be a good neighbor.
Very true. Very true. Be a good neighbor. Yep.
Be there for people.
Yeah. Well, this was a good interview.
Oh,
this
thank
was a
you.
good interview. Man,
Thank you for
this
sharing
is
everything.
It's one of my faves right here. So On behalf of Good Morning Aurora, we're glad to have had the chance to speak to Mr. Dave Weaver. Again, it's Breast Cancer Awareness and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. If you can, please volunteer or donate your time to two great organizations, Healing to Healthy and Mutual Ground. This has been an awesome show, great show. We appreciate Mr. Weaver's time. Be positive, be motivated, be dedicated, and be blessed on this Wednesday. And we will see you guys back here tomorrow morning for another great show with another great guest. Peace.